I'm your host, Mr. CCS, and these are my pets, George the Gorilla, Cole the Dolphin, and Frank the Sea Turtle. If you're wondering why I'm doing this monotone thing with my voice, it's because my voice is completely shredded, which wasn't exactly my fault, but it's the case anyways. I decided to push through because I want to make another video for you guys, and a sore throat isn't going to stop me. With that said, you might be asking what destroyed my voice. Well, I went to the entertainment capital of LA, Universal Studios Hollywood, recently. Not sponsored, by the way. And I had a run in with some faces you've seen on this show during this season, mummies and dinosaurs. I've talked about both this season, but only one of them got a second trilogy of movies. Today we're talking about the movie that genuinely made me not want to proceed through the season, as well as heavily appreciating some of the other reboots/sequels out there. Before we talk about that, let's get some historical context out of the way.
So, the first Jurassic Park was a huge success, as I've constantly talked about. After that, the two sequels were successes as well, but nowhere near to the degree of the first film. Regardless, these films together make an extremely profitable and successful franchise. By the time the third movie was about to be released, the fourth film, titled Jurassic Park 4 at the time, was entered into development to be directed by William Monahan, who wrote Martin Scorsese's The Departed, with Steven Spielberg serving as an executive producer. As far as story beats were concerned, it seems that this movie would have brought the characters from the first movie back together to battle humanoid dinosaurs, which wouldn't have exactly worked, but seemed kinda cool in concept. Eventually, Monahan left the project to work on Kingdom of Heaven, meaning he had to be replaced. John Sayles eventually wound up in the project, but the film was continually postponed due to Spielberg's dissatisfaction and involvement with other projects. Following this, Joe Johnston, who directed the third movie, was set to direct it, but he dropped out in order to work on The Wolfman, but returned to help patch up the script a few times. Finally, the film was handed over to screenwriters Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver, who wrote one of my favorite trilogies as of recent, the rebooted Planet of the Apes trilogy, where they incorporated several new ideas that eventually wound up in the final project. Directing the film was Colin Trevorrow, who wasn't super well known at the time, but he was experienced, so I guess there's that. Ultimately, the final project was eventually dropped into theaters in the summer of 2015 and was an enormous hit, grossing over $1 billion at the box office and having generally positive reviews. However, seeing as how I'm a massive fan of the original Jurassic Park, how does this film fare in comparison to the other movies?
It's time to talk about it. This is Jurassic World.
Located off the coast of Costa Rica, the Jurassic World Luxury Resort provides a habitat for an array of genetically engineered dinosaurs, including the vicious and intelligent Indominus Rex. When the massive creature escapes, it sets off a chain reaction that causes the other dinos to run amok. Now it's up to a former military man and animal expert, played by Chris Pratt, to use his special skills to save two young brothers, played by Ty Simpkins and Nick Robinson, and the rest of the tourists from an all-out prehistoric assault.
Okay, I'm going to say right now that I don't hate Jurassic World as much as some people do, but I don't like it as much as some people do either. This film feels like it's trying too hard to appear like it's respecting the original 1993 classic, but it also feels like it's not doing much work. I've never really been fond of reboots that try to replace the original works yet constantly remind you that they exist, which makes you wonder why you aren't watching a better movie in the first place, because Jurassic Park is one of my favorite movies, as you know. Overall, this first entry is one of the least guilty movies of doing that trend, but it is still obvious they are trying to be nostalgia baits. I'll discuss what that looked like in a minute, but now I want to talk about the movie in more depth because I need to show you how mishandled it is.
Okay, I want to be nice. The only character that I can confidently say was interesting enough was Owen Grady. This was right after Chris Pratt redefined himself as an actor due to him turning his weight into muscle for Guardians of the Galaxy, which is a big hit for Marvel. Needless to say, as the central character, I can say that he's a decent enough lead for the film. He's no Ian Malcolm or Alan Grant, but he gets the job done for being a likable protagonist. I mean, who wouldn't want to watch him ride a motorcycle through the jungle with a pack of velociraptors? that sounds like a ton of fun. Unfortunately, most of the other characters are not as interesting or completely unlikable. I've never really been fond of Bryce Dallas Howard as an actress. Don't get me wrong, she's a great director, but her acting skills are not that impressive. As Claire Dearing, she's very stiff and the character was such a stick in the mud. I get that what they're trying to do here, but it doesn't work for me because the performance wasn't convincing and the script didn't help either. Overall, I find her to be a very weak link type of character, whereas the first two films nailed the female lead. As far as the kids go, people always say that Zack and Gray are really obnoxious, but I never found them to be so. I just thought they were extremely undercooked characters that didn't add much to the overall plot. It just felt like they were recycling the plotline from the original movie, and that felt really cheap. After that, I'd say none of the characters are truly that interesting. Lowry in the control room was the only one remotely funny and memorable, and that's because he's played by Jake Johnson. But other than that, the rest of the characters are there for the sake of being there, including the new John Hammond character, Simon Masrani, who ended up dying in such a lame and forgettable way. I'm sorry, there's not much I can say about it. As far as the villains go, Vic Hoskins has got to be one of the worst villains in the entire series. Vincent D'Onofrio can play a great villain, as seen in Men in Black, Daredevil, and a few other things. But here, he just felt like an evil version of Robert Muldoon from the original movie. How do you take the head of security of a theme park filled with dinosaurs and make him a boring, cheap villain? Like this. He didn't work, despite D'Onofrio's pretty decent performance. Also, they turned Dr. Wu, a character from the original movie, into a main villain of the series. And I would hate that idea normally, but BD Wong actually pulled off a pretty decent performance as a cold and calculating main villain. Ultimately, I don't have many complaints on how they executed his character, other than I needed to see more of him, which is a problem the later two movies didn't rectify. Now, let's talk about the dinosaurs. We have some new additions to the franchise here, so let's talk about them. The Mosasaurus only had like a minute of screen time, but this thing gives Bruce the Shark a run for his money, because this thing is a ton of fun whenever she's on screen. One of my favorite dinos in the whole series by far. Of course, there's also a new pack of raptors, Charlie, Delta, Echo, and Blue. They were also pretty cool. Military-grade dinosaurs is kind of a stupid idea, but this is the franchise where they clone dinosaurs as well, so there you go. And I like their inclusion. We also have the T-Rex in this movie, and while not as cool as she was in the first movie, it was really cool to see the return of this magnificent beast. Finally, we have the new selling point of the dinosaurs in this movie, the Indominus Rex, a hybrid dinosaur. Yeah, I've never thought that this concept was a good one. Creating a new species of dinosaur by combining T-Rex, Allosaurus, and Raptor DNA was not an idea that worked in the slightest. I appreciate the filmmakers for making an admirable attempt, but it just didn't work for me. That said, I do love how sadistic this thing is, which was a major plus. The Indominus Rex was a force to be reckoned with, and that is the best part about the concept. Overall, the dinosaurs in this movie were the highlight of the characters, and that's because they had far more personality when compared to the humans. Of course, now we move on to the effects. This is the first of the Jurassic films that incorporated mostly CGI effects, which wasn't bad as it seems it would be, but I prefer practical effects anyway, so there's that, I guess. I will say that the CGI looks pretty great, however, mainly the dinosaurs. This is some of the best work ILM has ever done, and I have to appreciate it. As far as the music goes, it was composed by Michael Giacchino. He uses the original John Williams score from the original movie as a template and works it into some of his work. And I really like that about this new score. It's not as good nor as memorable as the original movie's soundtrack, but it's memorable and well done at the very freaking least. So there's that, I guess. Finally, there's the tone and the action sequences. I ultimately think that this movie would have worked if it was less fun, because I like the scarier moments from the first three movies a lot more than the fun stuff in this. That said, I do think this is a fun movie to watch, at least in regards to action scenes and dino sequences. Speaking of which, the birdcage scene, every chase with the Indominus Rex, and the final battle were the highlights of the action. Enough said. With that, I've got not much else to say. I know this is pretty short when compared to some of my recent reviews, but that's all I really have. Jurassic World is a very boring movie that I don't find myself ever wanting to revisit. It has some shining moments and some drawbacks. Ultimately, I'm split down on this one because I enjoy half of the content but dislike the other half, which is why the movie gets a 5 out of 10.
Well, that's all I got for you guys today. The good news is that I'm finally moving on to a movie I actually like next week, so that's something to look forward to. With that said, my name is Mr. CCS, these are my pets, this is Movie Central, and that, my friends, is a wrap. See you next week, and hopefully my voice won't be shredded cheese.